Hello everyone, welcome to today's episode. The title is the Inconceivable Speeds of the Inner Realms, and I would like to speak about this idea that at some point I feel in the future the civilization is going to have a galactic archetypal opening. And so what I mean by that is that there's going to come a time in the future where we will not be so easily content with what we have seen. We will kind of rage towards the new. So let us begin from here. That first, what is the inner realm? Before I speak about inconceivable speeds. Ultimately, when a person speaks, words harbor worlds within them. And so, when a person speaks, it is actually a reality present in their experience. It's a reality accessible. So right now, it's kind of interesting that, like, if you think about a memory of you 10 years ago or something. Okay, let me just double check if it's on. I feel that communication is a bridge between the different inner realms of people. How Mr. Within would explain the inner realm to the common man is that it's kind of like when you see a person, you see their appearance, you see their physical existence, but you have no idea how they are experiencing the earth. So the fact that we don't have each other's eyes, but we still have a perception of the world. Okay. Anyways, guys, sorry about that. Let's continue. Really, guys, what I'm trying to say, it's like the most simplest way to explain the outer realms. Your outer realms includes your sensory perception, okay? It includes what's in front of your eyes. But in some sense, what is behind your eyes, your inner realms, includes reality, but also the response. Also, there's the response of imagination. That means what's interesting is that these words that I'm telling you right now, this talk that I'm giving, it actually is originating from my inner realms. These words, before I mention them, they don't have a visible tangibility. They have no relationship to. It's like what's going on behind my eyes. Strangely, doesn't have that much of a relationship with what's happening in front of the person's eyes, in the sense that I can think of the earth moving, rotating the other way, but just because I think it, it doesn't. So we can say imagination is the stretch of reality, but through the inner realms. So what does that mean? That means I'm looking at a coffee cup right now. My coffee cup is half full. I imagine it completely full. So that imagination is like an example of the extension of the coffee cup, the liquid in the coffee cup. Anyways, so I just want to say that in front of your eyes, your outer realms, you see the objective realm, I call it. Behind your eyes, it's the subjective realm, and there's certain things that I feel human beings should know about the mind, and perhaps it's worthy to know these. One is that your inner realms are evocational. So what does that mean? That means the content of your mind is technically not your choice. So if you're not aware of how your inner realms are evocational, how, like, for example, when someone says the word apple, an image of an apple suddenly arrives, you got to kind of get a sense that you first think you are your mind. At first you think you have a mind. Then, then you think you are your mind. Then you realize you have always been witnessing the mind. That means the major discrimination or distinction between the mystic and the scientist was that the mystic wasn't, in some sense, accepting reality just by seeing physical reality. You see, it's kind of like when you look at ancient traditions, they would say that it's like ancient cultures, they perceived that it was like a union of Mother Earth and Father Sky. And so it's strange that we extend out of the earth, we evolve out of the earth, only to want to go above our clouds. You don't see, for example, like other animals in nature being as sophisticated as the human being. There has been an interference. I seriously feel that we are the residue of an extraterrestrial touch. Because the pattern of creaturehood is too unique. Either the sun's light beams are disseminating genetical data and information all over the universe, or it's kind of like, the various suns are like dissemination outlets for intelligence. I mean, you can kind of very playfully, this talk, I've given myself freedom to speak about the extraterrestrial archetype. It's kind of like wondering if an advanced civilization wanted to spread life all around the solar system. Imagine you're like an let's say, um, an advanced extraterrestrial species, you're like, all right, I want to go put life all over the, in different galaxies. So you would go and pretty much probably use light beams as the transmission mechanism. There was a time where I was actually getting a tan. When I say tan, that means it was like in my youth where I was just lying down on these hot stone stairs. I was lying down on these hot stone stairs on a sunny day in Tehran, Iran, and um, I was just like kind of like just letting you kind of just sit in the sun. Okay, and I was just like, it was after the swimming pool and whatnot, so I would kind of lie down on these, like, you know how you step out of a swimming pool, the wind of the environment can hit you, you get cold, but the staircase, the stone staircases of this pool in my childhood, in some sense, they were hot, like after the sun would hit them, so you would just lean, you would lie down on these hot stairs while the upper part of your body's freezing with the lower part your backside's warming up, you know. Anyways, I'm just saying that there was a sort of question in my mind that is the sun information? Is light design? That's the big question. Because we think light is just there for us to see design. We don't know if light has a design. We don't know if when the light beam goes into our eyes, after reflecting off the object, if it transforms or something happens to it. I mean, it's the concept of reflection is very strange because there's an archaic notion to an innocence that arrives when the person realizes that life isn't a rush. So I was like, wait a minute, this is ridiculous. All those things that you see, for example, in strict renunciate doctrines, that means in the wisdom traditions back in the day, pretty much people were like, yo, life is a dream, renounce it, you know, don't think you're this, you know. But it's like, how can I tell you, it's like, back in the day, they thought it was a dream, we think it's a reality, and then people are going to come, civilizations are going to rise, and they're going to think it's a dream, and then civilizations are going to rise, and they're going to think it's in some sense a reality. And so there is this constant going towards the multidimensional and then suddenly coming back to the singular. Like if you are, for example, a person who's raised in a theocratical society, or you in some sense you are like, your nation doesn't have just a name and a flag, it also has a strict ideological kind of framework. For example, people in North Korea have a totally different experience of life compared to people, for example, in Canada. After some point, you will notice uh, the circus of manifestation. And in Vedic thought, this was such a beautiful idea because it was known as the Leela. The Leela means the play. And when I say play, I mean it in the sense of the play of elements, the play of forces. You, in whatever complexity that you see yourself in, whatever complex life has found you, you will realize it is kept simple. Because in some sense, I remember I had a sort of dialogue with the logos. And what does that mean? That means your mind is so advanced that just look at the 8-year-old child's imagination. The 8-year-old child takes a teddy bear, and that teddy bear is real with it. Children that play with toys, they're technically playing with their own minds. Do you see what I mean? The object doesn't have life, but in the eyes of that child, it does. So now imagine an advanced human being, in how many ways would phenomenology be real to it or not real to it? Like, isn't this the case that some people, they look at a tree, they climb it. Some people, they look at a tree and they're like, I'm going to bulldozer over this because the real estate has a value. So you see, it's like there's so many different kinds of eyes, there's so many different value systems that we're going to inevitably realize that we cannot build an advanced civilization through unity. Through an ignorant unity, everybody's oneness, everybody's the same. It's like we can't advance as a species if we try to act like clones. So what does that mean? What is this theme of union? What is this theme of the collective human being that's been echoing through various narratives? I believe this theme is in some sense when the human being realizes that the value of the mind's being is more important than the value of the body's doing. That means, what if in all this moment, from the beginning of your life, you have been a mind, but you have believed yourself into just thinking you're a body, so you never wondered about the mind. You never wondered about your eyes beyond the images of the eyes. Like there's more to this world. There are certain, I sometimes in certain of my talks, I've spoken about them as like the cries of the world, as if you open your window and you kind of hear as if like nature, excuse my language, but like I'm going to be serious, mankind is raping nature in a weird way, indirectly. Like we're good-willed, we're civilized, but we don't realize it that our infrastructure is like literally like some sort of virus. Just like I think it's kind of it's strange. In one way, we have to encourage the technological sector of humanity and be like, rise, go and make the greatest technologies. But on the other hand, we have to look at nature and be like, we don't want to hurt nature in the process. And by hurting nature, let me tell you, there's like the abstract kind of nature lover hate. With that abstract nature lover hate. Abstract nature lover hate, you know. Guys, I don't know how to say it, but after some point you realize we're temporary candles with a certain level of illumination. We have a certain opportunity and possibility to kind of explore life before we return back to the unknown void. And so Mr. Within is saying, alright, so what do we do in this human life? So we have to kind of study our dimensions. So that means you imagine just like let's say like Star Trek, you just teleported into a world, but you don't remember like before that. You know, so imagine as if you opened your eyes anew right now. You just opened your eyes like for the first time. What would the value of everything be? You would see everything doesn't have a value. So anytime the human mind goes to some sort of nullification paradox or some sort of ambience of a balance of yin-yang balance of chaos and order, the mind subsides and neutralizes. Do you know? And when the mind neutralizes, it awakens from a different angle. So what that means is, like, I don't know if like, you can call it enlightenment, but there is this phenomena happening where certain human beings, in some sense, they realize they're not a thought and a concept, so their eyes literally perceive reality differently. I don't know how to say it. Like, there was a time where I would look at this world and I wouldn't see actually the world. I would see what I wanted from the world. And after a certain karmic turbulence, I began to realize, no, like reality is alive. That people are alive, and this system is way more complex than conceptual precision. You know, there's too much unknown. That means mysticism is very easy if you were the last person on earth, but because there's a civilization here, the mystic can no longer be the mystic. And I wondered in what profession, like guys, I really thought about it. I was like, what profession is going to rule above all professions in the future? And I realized it is the pilot. We are an advanced civilization, also has access to advanced skill, advanced opportunities. Me personally, I can say like in my inner realms it has moved at different speeds. Sometimes I've just been like raking like leaves, and just suddenly there's been like intense poetic passages, just like language enter my vision, you know, as if you treated the mind like an antenna, you're like, okay, so these sentences just came to me out of nowhere, you know. So there's this sort of reception that's going on. I feel we are antennas. I feel the mind is so sophisticated that we are actually simultaneously being the world as we're simultaneously being an individual in the world. That means there is an inseparability between your mind and how your mind is being your whole moment and how the world is being itself. You know, it's kind of profound. It's like the child of the sky and the earth. Who knew it was an oscillation between space and matter? Life is fascinating, guys. It's relationships, everyday reconnect. You don't know how many times in my life where I've walked with a sort of hat of assumption, as if like I've put a hat on, as if I felt I knew the moment, just to go into that moment and the wind blow my hat away. And I was like, whoa, I was definitely not prepared for this moment. But eventually there comes a level where fear archetypally gets savage. So some people say this happens when the person goes through a sort of intuitive shamanic journey, whether induced from a psychedelic state or not. Whatever it is, it's like you're an instrument, and your methods as a creature that you are open to, or whatever you do as a creature, is kind of directing your attention. So it's kind of like in a materialistic reality, perfect space to wonder about what is beyond matter. In an immaterialistic reality, perfect time to wonder what matter is. And this is why we have, in some sense, strangely, theoretical physicists, where they are, in the most abstract ways, trying to find how reality is not abstract. Because that's what a theory is, really. So for me, the world is a co-creation of what it is and what it can be. And we don't have to just be content with what it is. That means it's like, I think it's the responsibility of the advanced communicator that if you see a system, you should update it. If you can see the update in the system, you should instantly update it. That means there's certain moments in my life where I notice I could do I could just make certain decisions that literally updates my experience of life. So I am drawn towards that because you see, most people, they don't feel they deserve to exist because in a strange way their subconscious is reacting to a massive emptiness, right? We're on a rock in the middle of nowhere. You know, I asked last night, from the audience a question where I was like, if you are on a rock, if you're on a sphere in a vacuum, and you were standing on that sphere and you looked at your watch, what time would it be? And you would see there is no time in a world where you can't see its end, you can't see its absolute multidimensional texture. Do you know how much of it is like human beings are going like, all right, either we're limited or the world's limited. It's like, what can we do? You know? Either the self is infinite, or the self is finite, or the world is infinite, or the world is finite. When the world is finite, they called it apocalypse in the 6th century. When the self is finite, they called that death. When the self was infinite, they called that eternity, or you can say in some sense immortality. When the world was in some sense infinite, that was called heaven. So I can tell you that there is a sort of speed of self-identification with inner phenomena that's instantly evoked in accordance to how your attention moves, that beyond the clouds of change, the clarity of a changeless sky awaits. We are evolving beings. And by the nature of that means that whatever we feel we are tomorrow, we're going to wake up with a new experience completely transforming our archetypal position. I kind of like looked at this Carl Jung's idea of archetypes. And when you kind of look at it, Carl Jung is saying like, all right, man, human being, the child is born in this world. The child sees so many different things. So imagine, for example, yourself, ever since like you were born, like all the different kinds of people you've seen, what an image of a father means to you, what an image of a mother means to you, what the image of a president means to you, what the image of a sage means to you, what the image of a fool means to you, what the image of a warrior means to you, what the image of a joker means to you. In some sense, archetypes are kind of like being received like an antenna. So when Carl Jung said everybody has archetypes, and these are kind of like characteristics that you've kind of kept as the axis of the permission of what can happen in the context of your individualism, which is your collective being. So it's kind of strange. It's kind of like how you live as an individual suggests your collectivity. I feel what it is that this world is a strange place. That's it. It's a strange place. There's no such thing as normality because we're on a rock in the middle of nowhere, and that is the least normal thing I've ever witnessed. It's like, who dared create the word surreal without looking at reality more closely and seeing how surreal it is? Do you believe we're all on a rock right now, guys? Do you believe there's like skeletons in our body holding us that are made of calcium? Like this is some next level question. We have kind of like the ostrich. Civilization 1.0 is pretty much was like realizing how much man can fear. Civilization 2.0 will be the realization of how fearless man is. In my inner realms, it's like this. Right now I'm speaking to you, it's not that quick, so it's just the words. But when I speak sometimes really quick, I am kind of like walking in my inner realms, literally, but not as a body, as an attention. So it's like there's something about speech, there's something about every art form, everything, whether it's playing an instrument, whether it's the guy is singing, whether the guy is making ceramic, handicraft or whatever. I don't know, like whatever the guy's doing. After some point you see it's like skill, talent, creativity, genius, innovation, efficiency, advancement. That the archetype of that can never be experienced unless you choose to see it. What that means is, like, in some sense, it's kind of like Napoleon has this quote, and Napoleon was an emperor. So, like, this emperor's mindset was like they told him it's impossible. He probably told someone too early, he's like, I want to be emperor. And then they're like, nah, man, you can't be emperor. And Napoleon was like, he has this quote which is ascribed to him. He says, impossible is a word in a fool's dictionary. That means you set the limits, but you also set the limitless. And the moment you set the limits, you can realize what your limitless is. That means right now, you can say maybe you're a person who is more used to looking down upon yourself. Pretty much it's like this. Human beings right now, as I'm speaking, they're either looking up or they're looking down. Okay, when you look down on yourself, you feel you don't deserve, so you shy away, cower away. You don't even utilize the instrumentation that is this unique instrument that is your DNA, vision, and mind in motion. So there will come a time where you will realize it was never worth it to not trust yourself in this life. It was never worth it. That after some point you realize you are what you deal with every day. You as a person, your mind. I spoke about this idea called the crystal responsible mind, and what that meant was that the human being reached a sort of level of morality where, how can I say it? It's a level of morality where the experiential life sensitivity is automatically the decision making. So it's not about trying to memorize doctrines of good or bad. It's just realizing there's something alive here, and that it's not just at least in the waking state. In your dream states, do whatever you like. In deep sleep, nobody's around to do anything. But in the conscious waking state, man has access to an advanced civilization in the making. And it has to come from a shift in behavior. And behavior, Galileo has this quote, he says, what does he say? He says, you can never teach anyone anything. You can only make them realize it within themselves. And what does that mean? That means there never were teachers. They were just beings who were sharing their eyes, and people learned self-reflectively, as always. It's like, I remember I wasn't upset, but I was very intense. It's talk number 438. And I was in Iran. I was visiting there in the summer to see like my family on my father's side, my cousin's grandmother, who was very old. And so when I was there was this situation where I was suddenly asked to speak, and I was asked to speak at this gathering where all these people had come up and they introduced themselves as master. So imagine you're sitting in a room and 12 people come up and they call themselves master. Master, this guy's going to talk about this. Master, that guy's going to talk about that. And the whole thing was called like a self-discovery spiritual gathering. Jalasa funny. And in Farsi, that's how you would say. And so what happened was, after all these people had kind of spoken, none of them had spoken about the mind. Some of them had spoken about the mind, but nobody spoke about what they thought the soul was. Now I was like, okay, maybe it's like intense, maybe people are uncomfortable. But then I was called up last second, and they're like, you speak. And I remember, it was like an 8, they told me I have 10 minutes, I finished in 8. And I remember the last thing I said, I kind of very intensely said it. And I said the task of the outer guru or teacher or whatever that archetype you see is to really make you aware of the inner guru, or your whole life you will be chasing someone that is not your eyes at the end of the day. You see, that means I'm kind of saying that this is what I said exactly. I said your moment of being is your only guru, your only master, because it is the only thing, the only phenomenon that has been there from the beginning. It has been there from the beginning. That means wonder. This is why it's called self-realization. That means there's something there from before about the nature of the self, and you're like, oh my God, you're realizing it. Do you know? So that means it's like you are awakening from the simulation, similar to a caterpillar. It's like, yo, I'm a butterfly now. That butterfly is evolution. And so I'm constantly wondering, and I'm like, okay, Darwin, I get your point. Adaptation after a very long time, the the phenomena of evolution. But I'm saying this, that isn't it strange, guys, that evolution seems to be the eternal urge for continuity as a subject. As a subject. I mean, scientists, they don't believe in free will, but they believe what they say. They think free will is an illusion, but they think that they in some sense see truth. And sorry, I don't want to say science. Science is a method, really, at its core. I'm saying certain people use science to paint their actual emotional reality rather than the clear reality, because a method cannot, like, do you think this world with one method, like, were we that incredible as beings that, like, one method, one ring to rule them all? For me, it's a balance. It's a balance of really, like, on some level, guys, it's a bit, I guess for me, I'm a bit of a, I think I'm a bit too traditional, because on some level for me, knowledge shifted from the categories and classifications to really the classifications being in accordance to experiential relatability. So that means when I speak about a tree, it's like if there's a tree in front of me, I'm seeing it. Or if I'm in a room where there's no tree and I'm speaking about a tree, in my inner realms, I'm perceiving a tree. So your mind gives you access to experience the moment before it happens, and that's called observation. And when you realize that this kind of relationship of an object with an observer of the object, and a subject with a relationship with an observer of the subject, this is the ultimate realization. That the one that is aware there is an object, and the one that is aware there is a subject, are actually two sides of the same coin. You have an inner life, believe it or not. This inner life doesn't mean simultaneously, just like how you're in the physical reality, you're like in some other dimension standing as a totally different being living that life. It's not an inner life in sense of this like endless question of, yo, what if in one dimension I'm combing my hair left, and in another dimension I'm combing my hair right, and what if there's endless dimensions where I'm combing my hair in different ways? It's like, sure, it can be, you can play with infinity, but in some sense, if we seek meaning, we have to enclose the space. So kind of like, I'll say the best approach of the scientific method, it's like we can't breathe in outer space, we need to create an environment where we can breathe in. So I could say rationality is valuable, but you gotta realize this, guys, emotions after some point have nothing to do with the concept. But the emotion is what evokes the concept. It's how the attention lifts up. Like that moment where Superman was about to fly and literally the stones on the ground started to hover a little bit, I realized something very profound, guys. I think I had I was introduced to metaphysical ideology very early on in my life. So I didn't have a fascination from it until I reached a point in my life where experientially that fascination arose. That means, let me tell you what the normal state of the human being should be: endless advancement, no fear of maximizing speed, at the same time also not fearing of being able to preserve nature. There's a revolution that I hope it happens, and if it doesn't happen in 100 years, it's going to be too late. But I feel it's a revolution in all academic systems, all educational systems, all branches of knowledge. These branches of knowledge all have to come back to the human design. We have to prepare the backup programs that will protect in the next 120 years, the children will open their eyes in cyberspace, simulations not knowing if they're digital entities or they are natural entities. That's terrifying. So let me tell you guys, a person can cry for their past, but they can also cry for their future. You know, I've had moments where I poetically, it doesn't happen like this, but I'm poetically, in one of my poetic writings I wrote, where it was as if one night I had witnessed something that it was so intense that from one of my eyes there was coming tears of sorrow, and from the other eyes was coming tears of, in some sense, joy. And I saw the past, and I saw the joy of how the future arrived, and I saw the future, and then I saw something the past didn't do. That there probably is, I don't know, maybe like 50 generations that didn't play their part. They didn't listen to their intuitive resonance that much. So you see, it's like the first thing is, you gotta, let me tell you, you only, like, first of all, we are human beings, but I feel a person becomes an animal when they are caged. And some cages, they are not physical. They are ideological perspectives where the person hasn't had the inner bravery to change. It's like, this is why Isaac Asimov, this incredible scientist and science fiction writer, I respect his both ways he held the pen. But I could tell you this, that uh, he said violence is the last refuge of the incompetent. And Sun Tzu in The Art of War, this ancient book, he says that the great warrior defeats his opponent without lifting his sword, something like that. What does that mean? That means our minds are advanced technology where we not only navigate through meaning, we also generate meaning. We are like painters that also the painter is painting itself in its inner realms while biologically being part of some sort of program. So for me, I was like, all right, my biological existence, program of nature. The more I see nature, go towards nature, realize the value of nature, it seems like I won't forget, like, my body's value, the journey. So you gotta honor your physical existence. You shouldn't want to go to any metaphysics that's trying to run away from the world is a failed metaphysics. It is failed because in the long term it has set itself into a loop, endless loop, where it's as if the person running away and transitioning, it's like the person can get lost in that loop. That the notion of guilt was dark, it had negative connotation because it was a chain. What was it a chain to? It was a chain to the wrong participation with the moment. There's something that I was shocked, like I'm telling you guys, when I mean, I wasn't that culture shocked, but like I have kind of like, I feel like my psychology is in a mix of different cultures. That means, like, when I'm in Iran, I don't really feel like I feel Canadian. When I'm in Canada, I feel a bit more Iranian. You know? So I'm kind of like oscillating between culture. But for example, in a theocratical society, like I remember when I was a young kid in my grandmother's house, when they would call in like a technician to come and fix the fridge or the air conditioning or something, when that person would enter, that person intentionally had his eyes away, and he would say Ya Allah or something, as if like I'm entering the room, letting the women in the room know that they have to wear their um, you know, um, their hijab, their garb, you know. So it was a sort of strange religious privacy policy that was echoing in the whole cultural atmosphere. So, but on another level, it was also discretion, right? So, for example, it was such a fascinating thing that I saw that it's as if the Eastern cultures and Western cultures, they're the different brain hemispheres. Do you know? That means in certain religious environments, the whole point of the religion is that you, in some sense, stay pure, and as you stay pure, you're abiding by God's will. So if you follow the religious ideology, you have stayed true to a sort of purity that is going to be the way out. So you can say religion is actually very incredibly a stoic enlightenment. But it's a stoic enlightenment with a specific narrative. That means it's a unique simulation. But it doesn't mean the simulation is a lie. That means it's like if you walk that staircase, you go there. If you walk that other staircase, you go there. Do you know, even there's a book known as the Bhagavad Gita, in it says if you attach yourself to a divine agency, at the end of your life, the yogi or the mystic who's attached themselves to that divine agency, like worship the demigod or something, at the end of their life, that demigod would choose what happens to them, even though that demigod's choice is ultimately the choice of the one god where all the demigods arose from. Even in Greek mythology, it's like that. In all mythologies, pretty much there was like one god who was like, "Yo, am I the first in the party of existence?" And he was. That, most mythologies start from a spark of creation, as if you can't put any other philosophy on the paper other than one that is echoing how the ink on the paper is its own philosophy. So the concept of the Big Bang is similar to paint being dropped onto a canvas. Do you see? It's a splash of form. And we can say, in some sense, there is activity. So it's very complex. It's kind of weird. It's like we're not designed to comprehend the answer, but we're designed enough to ask the question. It's a very, very interesting design, this reality of ours, this plane of existence. So anyways, these inconceivable speeds, I find they arise when you kind of find what I've called decency resonance, or in Tibetan Buddhism they would say when you enter the Pure Lands. The Pure Lands is when you as a human being are resisting, you're not blind, but like, I'm not saying you're not ignorant, you're just not resisting how life is happening as it is before whatever reality you perceive. So it's like before you step out of, it's like the moment you wake up, just realize you have returned to the living. Because it's very hard at this point for psychologists to be like, we don't know, is when the person is asleep, does that mean they're technically dead as an idea? That means there's no thought, there's no consciousness. Is consciousness like a light in the room, that when the light is in the room, we see what the shadows on the wall? The speed of the inner realms is kind of like you starting off with pulling a string, and as you pull the string, the speed of the string arising is coming quicker. So it's like you're like, oh my god, how much string is there? And so as you're pulling all this string, you're suddenly realizing it reaches a point where you do one last pull and the roll goes endless, 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 endless. And that's when the archetype of the human being has evolved from parallel multidimensionality. Then it can trust itself to solidify as a galactic archetype. So you can say, we don't evolve into a galactic civilization. We have to open our eyes in one, technically, in a strange esoteric way. So you see what I mean? It's like the world's getting much more cooler than old school ritual and modern ignorance. It's just becoming something new, something we can't consider, and that makes us excited to build an advanced civilization. So you gotta just get a sense of your attention. The best way to, even before the person wonders about their inner realms, practice concentration on the visible. Study what you see, literally. But when I say study, there's different kinds. There's like a studying where the poor soul is trying to like act as a machine, but and then there's a kind of studying where it's like the street smart way, where you're like, what is the image the idea is trying to paint? That means when you read a philosophy of Socrates, it's like you can't not be interested in the life of a person. You get pulled into wanting to know how the eyes were open, because that's really what knowledge is. Just different human beings looking at this world and talking, sharing how the world, how light entered their eyes and reflected out as a philosophy. For me, the coolest thing is that communication is advancing. That means it's not just objective phenomena that's crystallizing, even subjective phenomena is crystallizing. So what does that mean? That means it's not just we're becoming aware of objects in more sophisticated ways, we're also becoming aware of subjects. And Mr.Within is saying we're going to one day see that we were never a subject, we were all part of this giant process. This giant process is strange because your individual activity is the boundary of your mind, but when you look at the sky doesn't have boundaries. So the mind doesn't have boundaries when you look at the sky. Do you see? So it's like that Swami Krishnananda makes the point really clear. He says there is no longer need for meditation when you realize the inseparability of the individual activity and the cosmic activity. And that's when you go into when Sri Ramana Maharshi says meditation becomes your true nature. That means there's no longer a meditation, there's no longer a meditator, there's no longer even a concept of like higher dimensions or whatever. You are just being as you are before you think you are. And there is a strange momentum to that, where the inner realm suddenly it's like they notice you. The world notices you. Not the world. I don't mean like human entertainment. I mean like the world soul sees you. The world soul is how the future generations will advance in accordance to what we say now, what we do now, how we breathe now. So anyways, guys, that's the end of the talk. I'm going to open it up to Q&A. One last thing I'm going to say. Actually, I didn't even talk about that much. Galactic archetypal openings. Let's say right now we say free will is an illusion, and if it's an illusion, what's separating from a person feeling that how they see themselves as a self? What if right now, like aliens were living among us on the streets, and literally the United Nations had a galactic sector, and extraterrestrials were immigrating on Earth, and certain human beings were immigrating to extraterrestrial planets? Can you just imagine that? So can you imagine walking on the street and being like, yeah, man, there was a day where if an alien was walking on the street, we would freak out. But now we have become such an advanced civilization where we realize our mind's position before our body's demise. That there is something moving here, folks. And that's life. And death, it seems to be when the attention goes away from it. And for a long time, I remember I heard the word live for life, like a person attaining immortality or eternalhood. And then I suddenly, in one of my talks, I suddenly kind of connected the idea, and I said that in some sense, I suddenly saw like a macro value into this idea that the way to live for life is to live for life. You gotta serve this world. You gotta act. You gotta engage. You gotta care for the mind of the living species, or in some sense, you were never human from the beginning. It's like, what the hell are all those violent people doing? Don't you understand your species after 4 billion years is attempting something? You know, it's always, again, easier to destroy something than build it. So in life, when you identify with like building something, you get a different kind of rhythm to your life. It's as if like your attention finds the important. Yeah. So, anyways, guys, the Q&A is open. Whoever's interested, feel free to ask a question or share a comment or observation. And yeah, so Q&A is active. Yeah. All right, interesting, interesting. So, great question. Yeah, Hurricane. So, guys, in the chat section, this is the Q&A portion of the talk. This is a live stream. So, Hurricane says, your imagination is fired. Really? I need to look for new employment for my imagination. I'm joking. So yeah, you mean my imagination is fired up? How did that occur? How long ago and why? It occurred. It occurred through a series of events. Some of those events were me stumbling. Some of those events were after this kind of sense of this surrender of this weird resistance I had to the world. And the surrender of that weird resistance went away when I noticed my own mortality. So that's what I'm saying, Hurricane, that I noticed the sands of the hourglass are falling, kind of, and I also noticed that I still didn't know who I was. And then I looked at kind of like, I was like, all right, so if I don't know who I am, what are other people saying that we are, right? And then I realized, I looked at it through various eyes, but really that wasn't what inspired me. What really inspired my inner realms was that some important event took place. No. It was inner. It was an inner significance. Something drew my attention in my inner realm. Suddenly, my attention noticed something out of the day. Okay, it was. I don't know how to say it, guys. It was like. So here's the progression. In my youth, I felt I didn't have an imagination. I didn't feel creative. I was a designer. I was a designer since childhood. Like, I liked design since childhood. But I didn't have, like, an abstract narrative imagination. Okay? And then it went through a series of events where suddenly I wasn't thinking about creativity at all. The beginning was that I realized I didn't know who I was looking through my eyes. Like, I had no clue. I realized every thought I have of it is just another thought. There could be endless thoughts, but when I notice I'm not my thoughts, it's like, who am I? Right? So then I kind of had to look at the direct experience of the moment. Right? So I'm saying it was this kind of situation where first it began with me just getting a notebook and just answering my own questions in that notebook. Then it evolved into me kind of communicating. I just wanted to hear my own voice. Then it evolved into, in some sense, me wondering about the mind as an into as a sort of activity. I don't know how to say it. It's like um, I returned to the unknown. I saw the unknown. That's I know that sounds pretty intense. It's like, yo man, how, how do you get imagination fired up? You look at the unknown. Oh man, that's so silly. But no, seriously, guys, I came to a preferencelessness where it was as if I stepped out of a way I felt life had to be. There we go. And then you kind of see something else. You see something different. You know? They say human beings use 12% of their brain. I was wondering, like, first of all, how do you measure that? But, like, at the same time, in some sense, aside from the neural activity, how do you use that other percentage? And I'm telling you, if your attention is on trying to be a self, or if your attention is on trying to advance as a world, it's different. Your inner authorization is different. So the thing is that it's like what Rumi says, your task is not to seek love, but get rid of all the barriers you've made against it. So when you realize what those barriers are, you come to what they would say your true nature. You see what you are, as a being. No. I'm just saying, Hurricane. It's like this. It's like something becomes important. That importance makes you automatically apply effort. You just carry on. As you carry on, you enter this space where you don't know. You're new. You're like a new person in a new world. Okay? It's unknown. Right? You come to that unknown feeling. And when you come to that unknown feeling, there is something where it's as if the mind moves before the body and you suddenly know. It's like a microsecond. It's like in an instant where you suddenly know it's like you're alive as space as through the body. So that's my view, of course. I'm just one guy sharing my view, but that's like I'm just saying you're telling the story. You're telling a story to yourself, which is suggesting the ability of the character. Stop telling yourself the story. Try to see what your eyes are before you learned language as a human being. Or not before languages, in some sense, you just watch the moment, and that instantaneity of attention's presence, watching, is it. So I'm telling you, you haven't confronted the simple. That's why complexity feels exciting for you. You know, not complexity, but complexity seems sophisticated. Unknown means you don't know and it's okay. Do you see what I mean? So I'm saying, like, Terence McKenna had this quote, guys, this scholar, he said, nobody knows enough to worry. Now, what if we say, nobody knows enough to define themselves? It's like if we are a dynamic process, I'm telling you, it's like in life, nothing, your care for knowledge will only, like the knowledge that remains with you in this life, is if you are attempting to answer the ultimate questions of your inner realms. Like you care to ask those questions. You care to just wonder in this life, okay, my eyes are here for a little while. What is valuable? What is the meaning? Like, it's like, do you know what I mean? It's it's like the person's like, why am I here? Do you know? And it's like a story, a thought comes, like a story. He's like, okay, maybe I should go this way. And then suddenly he asks the question again, why am I here? Inevitably, eventually the person's like, okay, I could endlessly see reasons to reason. I could endlessly ascribe symbols to objects. I could, instead of calling this cup, call it like, um, uh, um, a devolved cylinder, you know, or an evolved cylinder. I don't know. Like, do you see what I mean? It's like you can attribute a concept, and that's all that reality has been. That's all knowledge is. It is literally connecting a subtler world to a more gross and dense world. You know. For me, I'm like, we have to kind of like evolve and advance language. I can totally see why so many scholars and continental philosophers were like, language, guys, don't get too carried away by the stories you think are fixed lenses to look at the world through only. Life is a progression. It's look at nature. Everything, like even if you're a religious person, you can't ignore this, that everything in the world is growing together. So it's as if it's like all those people who see all of life is God's will. So technically, everything is God's will. The opposition is God's will. Everything is God's will. Do you know what I mean? From a religious perspective, I'm speaking to religious audiences here. That I'm saying you are seeing everything as God's will except yourself. You're seeing that squirrel on the tree, God is moving that. Oh my God, the suns and the stars, God is holding that lantern in the sky. But when it comes to yourself, you're like, no, I messed up, I'm guilty. You don't see nature in yourself. And any ideological system that doesn't care for the eyes of nature, it destroys itself. Very easy. It doesn't even care for its own continuity. Guys, my personal vision, and you guys have to understand this, like I'm a certain person speaking. My vision is to usher civilization towards this idea I've developed. I call civilization 2.0. Ultimately, I realized all my visions were going there. So I'm that guy in history who's saying that in 600 years we're gonna set all human civilization for 2,000 years is gonna go live in sky cities. Welcome to the channel, guys. This is what the channel is about. Sky cities, you know. A city in the sky. Like the pattern is so ancient and beautiful. Just like how I feel like I can't tell you, but I feel there is a beauty to freedom, and there is a beauty to freedom when it is aware of itself. It's very fascinating. Yeah, guys, because let me tell you, language communication is technically piloting people's attention, right? So I'm speaking as a painter. Throughout all these years that I've been giving this talk, my masterpiece is Civilization 2.0, pretty much, which you're going to see me pretty much my whole life. Maybe one day I'll be going to schools or somewhere and trying to see how people see the idea. Anyways, guys, so Hurricane, I would say pretty much you find something so important and so beyond your limitation that you automatically update in the attempt to do it. So guys, I don't know, I'll give it a few more minutes if nobody has any concern. We shall watch the day move on. I would say this though, since childhood I was aware of my moment prior to thought. So people are different. You can't really categorize everyone, but when we speak, we have to generalize to some degree. It's an interesting time. I think our relationship with archetypes are changing. Our relationship with selfhood is changing. Cyberspace culture is opening its eyes. AI is opening its eyes. Technology is literally like a pen. It writes the future. When the world doesn't allow itself to write, the attempts of the day are lost. I mean, seriously, guys, think about it. We have evolved from savage animals. The expectation is savageness. That means it is very, very, very normal to expect savageness, you know? But as Rumi said, chaos and order, the being conscious of it, it's like, sure, chaos, show your face. But at the same time, what is the value of the moment? And you'll see it's always towards the new. And that's why, in some sense, adding a new dimension to someone's vision is more interesting than trying to break your own face in someone else's image. So, I don't know. me guys, that was probably too loud. Okay guys, so Ivan in the chat section brings up this idea of kinda, if he says if you're light, you only see your shadows. So that's an interesting question. I think really what it is, that if you are light, if you are light, technically you are never the shadow, right? If the first axis, or let's say the first idea or premise, let's say if the first acceptance, okay, is that we are light, like if we look at the statement, light only sees the shadow. If we see we are light first, technically, even if we see the shadow, you are never the shadow. So the shadow is a simulation of the light. So I would say in some sense, Ivan, that it is a simulation. No, I'm just saying, before the archetype or whatever the person thinks they are, who are you? You're just being here. Be comfortable with how things are so you won't get disturbed. The concept of desire after a point doesn't make sense. Like when you desire to drink a glass of water, is that like, no, don't desire to drink water? You know, so at some point you see it's like it's not about it's not about the desire is bad. It's that the attention getting trapped on, I don't know, like the attention has to move. So anyways, guys, study your inner realms. Nobody has your eyes, and if they did, it'd be freaky. You won't the clones. Like the idea is that we have to share our inner realms, and then inevitably realize that time is malleable. Guys, imagine this. Imagine language is weather. Okay? Imagine your beliefs and ideology are weather. Now imagine there are situations where it's just raining. Best thing you can do, get an umbrella or get out of the rain. Okay, another approach is you have to stand in the rain. Let's say the person has an emotion, intense emotion or something, you stay in the rain. The whole point is, in any moment of your life, this is universal, you can always look. You can all the attention is allowed, unconditional, like push, like it's like an effort. Your presence is the connecting, is the center of how all sensory perception gravitates. Guys, one quote I'm gonna leave you off with before I end right now is, I'm gonna say this, guys. This quote really helped get a certain, at least in my experience as one person, a certain karmic depth, not a karmic depth, a karmic weight off my shoulder. This one quote from Rabindranath Tagore, this Indian polymath and poet. He says, I slept and dreamt that life was joy. That means he, in some sense, awoke in this world and felt it was a pleasure seeking. Then Rabindranath Tagore says, I slept and dreamt that life was joy. He says, I awoke and I saw that life was service. So he was in this youthful illusion of, oh man, I just want to go do what I like. I want to go on my own adventure. From that youthfulness, and then develop to a sort of mindset Sorry, guys, I had to handle something. Um, Sudden things happen. Anyways, guys, the quote is: I slept and dreamt that life was joy. I awoke and saw life was service. He realized reality is something that you gotta live. You gotta serve it, and then serve your civilization. And then there is, in some sense, like he says, I slept and dreamt that life was joy. I awoke and saw that life was service. I acted, and behold, service was joy. That action means after some point of processing in a sensory way the whole meaning of life, you gotta eventually, after some point, move. You know? Study your own mind. Imagine nobody has your eyes. The Buddha has this saying where he says this life is really a solo kind of journey, and if there's companions, that's like a blessing. He says it like that. That means that the edge of the spectrum is solitude, existential solitude, and the other edge of the spectrum is experiential collectivity. So, anyways, guys, thanks for tuning in. I hope this episode was helpful. And I don't know. I don't know if I'm doing like I'm just trusting my inner realms with these talks, and I really don't know like how far it goes. Sometimes when something is so complex for me, I can't fathom. I take at least the closest step I can, and it's kind of like going towards heat. And after some point, you can't go any closer; you burn. So it's like I go as far as I can towards the unknown, and then you're just kind of there. So, anyways, guys, thanks for tuning in. Much blessings, honestly. And one thing I'll say this before I go, guys. Chung Tzu said, "Your thoughts are like leaves on a tree." So just literally think about this: that the seasons pass and the leaves of the tree they emerge differently. So in some sense, it's this constant reanimation through the same design. That means I think human beings have access to a field of mind where it is inseparable literally from energy, which is everywhere. And happening is once. Albert Einstein says, uh, time is the, what do you call it? Time. Albert Einstein says, time we created time so everything doesn't happen all at once. Just take that in and tell me, if philosophy is dead or not. Walk the road of your eyes to discover the feet beyond it. Yeah. There will be a time where it's going to be so down to earth, the fact that galactic archetypes are going to just be there, you know. That means the first extraterrestrial immigrant on earth that reads Carl Jung is going to be like the first galactic archetype. Blessings.